We had a great conversation last week about the beginning of Jacob's life. And we talked about how he tricked his brother for his birthright. He tricked his father and stole his brother's blessing. And then because of that, he ends up running for his life. He winds up in the desert with nothing. And then God appears to him and gives him the best blessing he could ever receive. And that led us to a conversation on how you can create something for your life, but can you sustain it? You can work hard enough to make it happen your way, but can you keep it there? And in that, we concluded knowing we don't want control. We want God to have control over the direction of our life. And this week, we're going to expound on that conversation, and we're going to open up and say, what if you could work hard enough to create something for your life, and you could sustain it? It would stay. But the thing that you thought would bring you joy and peace and happiness, then that blessing actually is bondage. What if the thing that you thought would set you free actually keeps you down? That could just exclusively be a conversation on debt, but it's not. Anyways, today I wore this outfit, and I just have to address this just because I had another conversation between services. But on Easter, I wore a very similar outfit, and I saw my mother, and I was like, "Hey, Mom," and she goes, "Wow, you look like an actual pastor." Which is why we haven't talked since Easter. I'm kidding. We talked last week. And, but then I walked behind stage this morning, and I saw Steve, who's just a phenomenal man, and he goes, "You're not dressing like you normally do. This is weird." All right, and then right after service, I'm standing over here greeting people, and Scott comes over to me and he goes, "Don't ever do this again, I don't like this." Who knew? Guys, I'm just trying to talk about God. Why are y'all focused on my outfit? Leave me alone. I'm kidding. There's 3 other shirts in the car. I couldn't decide. All right. We're opening up in Genesis chapter 29, and I'm kind of going to give you an overview of this so you don't have to listen to me share 50 verses because you wouldn't come back. So Jacob, he hears from God, and he leaves and goes to the place where he had been sent because his mother had sent him to find a wife. And he gets there, and right as he gets there, there's this girl who's tending to a flock of sheep, and he's like, "Hey girl, how about those sheep?" And she's like trying to water the sheep, but there's a stone covering the well, so she can't get to it. So he's like, "It's time to show my masculinity and prove that I can provide by moving this rock." And so he moves the rock, and the flock gets watered, and it reads like this in the Bible, which is hilarious. It says, "Jacob came near and rolled the stone away from the well and watered the flock. Then," it's like immediately after, "then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud." Every time I cry after kissing someone, it just like, they're like, "I don't want to see you again." I don't know how this worked out for him. It's weird. I went to like a Christian college, by the way, and like Christian college and dating is like the weirdest thing ever. Like you invite someone to coffee to get to know them, and like you sit down before you've ordered a coffee, and they're like, "It's been a while, and I just need to know what this is, if you're committing or not." And I'm like, "I can't even commit to this menu. Leave me alone." I'm not kidding. Christian college is terrifying. Everyone's like, "I'm here to get married." I'm like, "Learn to like married." I'm like, "Okay." So he stays there, and he works for her father, and her father approaches him, and he says this to him, picking up in chapter 29, verse 16. "Now Laban had 2 daughters." Back up. He had asked him, "If you're going to work for me, how should I pay you?" And this is what happens. "Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, 'I will serve you 7 years for your daughter Rachel.' And Laban said, 'It's better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me.' So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her." Aww. People today can't wait 7 seconds for Tinder to download, but it is what it is. The other crowd was like, "What's Tinder?" People can't wait 20 minutes to log into Farmers Only. There's the rest of the crowd. We found them. So we found him. Got to know your audience. So this section, if you don't know how to get a hold of them, farmers only. You don't have to be lonely. So, Rachel's beautiful in every way. She made you weak at the knees, and Leah's made you weak at the eyes. I don't know, she's like a pirate woman. Not beautiful, so he clearly falls in love with the beautiful woman. And just real quick, this phenomenal. He loved her so much, working 7 years was but a few days. I'm not married, so anything I say about relationships is opinion at best, so feel free to disagree with it. But the thing I love about this is it's not saying that she was so great that he was willing to do this because it seemed like the proper investment of his time. It says that he loved her so much he was willing to make this big of an investment. I believe all relationships, whether it's friendly or intimate, is based off of whether or not you're willing to be the right person, not what that person is willing to provide for you. I believe if we approach relationships going, what can you give me? We're going to end up really broken and really dissatisfied. I think if we approach things going, what can I take? I think it's a step towards a dysfunctional relationship. So, who are you willing to be the right friend for? If you have a significant other, are you willing to be right to them? If not, that's okay. Get out. And if you disagree with me, I'm sorry, I have the mic right now. I'm kidding. Okay. You can argue with God. Because the Bible tells us that God came because he was willing to be right for us, not because we were right for him. And then he goes a step further to say, love people how I loved you. So the only proper way to love somebody is what you're willing to provide for them and what you're willing to give, not what you're trying to take. Friendship or otherwise. We are a people who's supposed to give. So jumping back in at verse 22, still in chapter 29, it says, so Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. This is at the end of the 7-year period. It's time. So there's a feast to celebrate the wedding. But in the evening, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. What? And Jacob said to Laban, what is it that you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? And Laban said, it's not done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Complete this week with this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. I love excuses on a side note because excuses are always easy to see through. Like, oh, that's just not our culture. And it's like, so you didn't tell me about that? You didn't explain that to me? But also at the same point, like, this dude loves a girl enough to work 7 years. He's been around her for 7 years, but he can't remember which one's the beautiful sister and which one's the pirate sister. I'm just saying, this is worse than calling your wife by your old girlfriend's name. Like, this is bad. You're never going to live this one down. But just so you know how marriage was determined in ancient Jewish culture, first would be a betrothal, which is legally you are now bound. That's what happened way back when Laban said, 7 years, you can marry my daughter. Legally, she was bound to him. They weren't officially married, but she couldn't be with anyone else. The contract was there. But now, because of how he was tricked, he also has to marry Leah. So, in that society, he's been completely deceived and tricked. Also, when I was looking this up to make sure I was right, because if you share something like how culture was, you want to make sure you're right, because there's always at least one person in a congregation who also knows how to use the internet and will come to you and be like, actually. So I was typing it into the theological source called Google, and so I was typing in, and I was like, how was marriage determined? And as soon as it said determined, it was like a drop-down window of one option, and it literally just said, in Missouri. I'm like, What's going on in Missouri? Why can't they determine if they're married? I don't know, man. It's just confusing in Missouri. It's misery. So it kind of seems like Jacob got what he deserved here, doesn't it? All the main notes of his life has been him tricking and deceiving and stealing what he wanted, and it kind of seems fair. And there is a huge conversation here about sowing and reaping, and there's a big, just wonderful conversation on how we treat people. But we're going to ignore that today, and we're actually going to talk about his first wife, Leah. Because we give Jacob a real hard time for not knowing which sister was which. And just so you know some backstory, the word we use for feast there, actually, if we take the original Hebrew, it directly translates to the word drink banquet. So basically, just like imagine the bachelor party was immediately before the ceremony. So dude was like mad intoxicated. And I'm not making a case for my guy here, but I'm explaining it. But I want to say no one tricked Leah. She was not deceived at one point. She didn't wake up in the morning and go, what? She wasn't tricked at one point. Which leads us to our first point today, which is, what if it's not your time to shine? I can imagine the set of emotions that Leah had been dealing with in her life. I imagine that every person she ever liked, every guy she ever liked her sister. And I imagine the way she must have felt being alone and wanting to be loved. And then this guy comes out of nowhere, sees her sister, and was like, I will give up 7 years of my life to marry you. And now it's been 7 years and still no one's interested in Leah. She's getting older. Probably all of her friends are married, and she's told she has a great personality, but that hasn't done much. And then her dad comes to her and goes, hey, I've got a plan to get you what you want. I imagine there was this weird anxiety. I imagine that she felt some sense of nervousness and urgency. It's like, I can finally be loved and cared for. Sure, I'll have to trick him, but once he gets to know me, it'll be fine and it'll be great. Man, you know, not every opportunity is a God opportunity. Not every door you can walk through will lead to something good. Things haven't gone the way she wanted them to in her life, and she's deciding, well, maybe now I can make it happen for myself. I think Christian people sometimes get tired of waiting in hard situations, and we go, God, I know you're supposed to come through for us, but I'm tired of waiting on you, and I'm going to make it happen for myself. God, I know you promised me a good relationship, but I'm going to make some compromises here so that I can have what I want. You see, no one has ever been dissatisfied with what God gives them. The only thing people are ever dissatisfied with is the time frame in which God gives it to them. Not every opportunity is an opportunity you should take. Whenever I was about 14 years old, I was hanging out with the guy who was our worship leader at the church at the time. And he was like 23, I was like 14, I think. I think I was 14. And we were hanging out, we were having a good time. We were driving to my house so I could get some clothes because I was gonna like stay the night at his house. And we had like 5 acres, there was a big ditch behind our house. And we got there and he was like, hey man, my uncle gave me this gun. We can all tell the story's going in a good direction. Can't wait. And I was like, cool man. And he's like, can I shoot it here? And I'm like, sure. So, I go inside, grab clothes, come out, and he's got 2 clips. And he takes his Beretta and he just like fires the whole clip unloads, stats people, fires the whole thing down in this ditch. Everyone's safe. And then we just jump in the car and drive away. All right? And I'm riding in this car, we're going over a hill, and I come over a hill, and a cop car's coming at us. And I think, wow, I wonder what happened back there. I wonder who they're going to see. And they stop us right in front of us, and then another one behind us comes up. And then another one in front of us. And another one. I was like, surely there's some mistake. No, there was not. But let me tell you the best part. Jumped out, hands on the dash, fun stuff. I had some handcuffs on. Right as I'm outside of this car and the car's getting searched, I see my dad in his truck drive over the hill. And we just make eye contact, and I'm like, hey, Dad, what do you do today? Fun. Please don't background check me. I'm kidding. Everything went fine. Everything went fine. My friend got a ticket. It was pretty bad, but I was fine. But not every opportunity is a good opportunity, because just because something can be done does not mean it should be done. And let me tell you, you have complete control of your life, which means you have the ability to wreck your whole life. You also have the ability to give up control to someone who designed your whole life. See, you can try and make it, or you can accept it. If you try and make it your way, you might not like what you end up with, but if you just try to accept what God's trying to give you, you might not like how long you had to wait, but you'll always think it's worth it. Not every opportunity is a God opportunity. And it won't ever be your time to shine until you bring God in on the matter. All right, so picking up in verse 30, it says, so Jacob went in to Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban another 7 years. Continuing in verse 31, it says, when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, for she said, this is why she had a son, because the Lord looked upon my affliction, and now my husband will love me. Then she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived and bore a son, and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Earlier we talked about how a foundation of a relationship should be based on what we give to a person and not what we receive. And this relationship's exactly backwards, you see. She's turning the relationship into a transaction where she's saying, I will provide for you children, and I will make you honored, and therefore you will love me. It's become cruel, it's become broken. Unfortunately, I believe this is the situation we find ourselves in with people so often. I truly believe it's more often than we'd like to admit. But we give ourselves the things for them to love us, not for us to love them. Let me drop this down on a simple level. No one ever bought a car that they couldn't afford because they just wanted to take care of that car. They're like, well, that car deserves to be taken care of. They liked the way it made them feel. People don't get into relationships to be treated like human trash cans. They get into them because they're trying to receive a feeling. And they work overly hard to try and provide something for themselves. Let me tell you this, that the most human emotion in the world is to feel broken and like something's missing. That if you've ever felt broken, you're not an emotional anomaly. In fact, you're right how you should feel. Because humanity apart from God is broken. Because humanity apart from a creator that designed it doesn't know how to function. And let me tell you this, I love playing guitar. I love playing guitar. But for years, I played, like literally 3 years on this stage, I played guitar with broken cables. Like I would literally have to turn them in a certain position to get them to make sound. It was a real problem. We'd be like in the middle of like a big part of a song, and I was about to like shred some solo that should not have been shredded, but I was like 17, so I was like, gonna shred this solo and make random girl number 5 fall in love with me. Never worked, not one time. I told the first service this, so I'll tell you this. One time, in the middle of a worship song, I put a Metallica solo in the worship song. They were not happy with me. Anyways, it was like, Jesus, and I was like, one guy in the corner's like, yeah. You know how easy it would have been to spend $15 and get cables that worked? Or even worse, to like open a bin with cables that we have here for broken guitar cables and just replace them? But instead I would turn them awkward ways and like try and like fit it, nail it down. I literally zip tied them in a position one time to try and get them to work. We do the same thing emotionally where we'll try and pull the right people in our lives and have certain successes and buy things we can't afford and get ourselves in relationships we shouldn't be in to mangle and twist and pull things into the right place to feel like we can emotionally function. If I wanted to make it more relatable, and it sounds like, no, Ryan, I'm not that broken, let me just talk about all the times everyone in this room has called someone not because you needed a friend, but because you just felt sad and was hoping someone would make you feel better. Instead of going to a source that knows us and designed us, it can actually get to the bottom of our emotional brokenness. Let me just say this. I think the reason a lot of Christians don't experience deeper and more real relationships with God, and they just end up coming to church and not really understanding why it's about, but what it's about, but doing it out of habit, is because we're not really willing to get vulnerable with God. And even more that, I think it's also because we just come to church to receive and not to give. Let me tell you this, and I do not mean to be offensive in any ways, but this whole service is about you. From start to finish, it's because we love you and we think of you and we want you to experience God and feel like you belong, and you do. Except for worship. It has nothing to do with you. It's not about you. We like to pick songs that maybe you like or things that would encourage you to worship. But it's actually the only part that by definition is not about you, because we're not worshiping you. We're worshiping God. It's about God. And let me tell you this, that part of the service is just for Him. But He's so good that when you come to give to Him, He gives back to you. And if you show up to a worship service and you show up to receive, you probably will, because that is how good God is. He's so good that if you come to Him and say, please let me experience peace, He's not going to say, no, because you did it in the wrong way. But there's so much more that you're not experiencing when you just come to receive, because when you come to give, He gives back to you. That is His nature. That is who He is through and through in every situation. I promise we were designed to give from ourselves, like we talked about in relationships, but we were designed to do it while receiving from our source. There's a story I want to tell real quick. I'm going to try and sum it up. But I was debating whether or not I should share this, but I truly believe that the success of how we express God and minister and share and communicate the gospel will be determined by how vulnerable we're willing to be. And a few years ago, I got the opportunity, tell it this way. I had 2 friends and they owned a gym together. It was great. It was some of the best times of my life, hanging out with them, just being guys. And we spent every day together. But eventually these 2 guys started having conflict and they couldn't even be in the same room together. They wouldn't hang out. It made me real sad. And then one day they came to me and were like, hey, Ryan, we can't get along, so what if we just sell you part of our shares into the company and you can just mediate between us constantly, which is a great idea for business, to mix friendship and arguments and business. In case you need a quick business lesson, it never works unless there's intense, deep-rooted conflict that has nothing to do with the business. And I was like, this is a great idea. Did I ask God one time? No, because I thought, I'm going to fix this friendship and I'm going to force this to work because I don't want to lose my friends. And it was fun, don't get me wrong. We had a great time. Doing personal training for people is one of the funnest things in the world because it's literally listening to people lie to you nonstop. Like, nonstop. People are like, I don't know why I haven't lost weight. I've only ate 1 apple a day for the last 5 weeks. And I'm like, Jamie, there's barbecue sauce on your face. Or like, guys will be like, yeah, man, I would have gone pro if it wasn't for that shoulder, man. And that shoulder stopped me. I was going to do it. And we're like, no, Clint, you have the hand-eye coordination of a blind man. And he's like, what do you mean, man? It's a shoulder. It's a shoulder. No, not a chance. For real, people will lie to you. They'll be like, I don't know, it's just when I have 1 carb. And I'm like, yep, 100 carbs for every meal, 5 meals a day. You're right. I'm not joking. People just lie straight to your face. But it was a great time. It was a great time, except for the fact that I was never able to repair my friend's relationship. In fact, it just got worse to the point where, to this day, I'm not even in contact with him because I asked myself what would have happened if instead of just going, I want it this way and I'm going to make it happen and I'm going to force these guys to be friends, what if I just would have asked God what he wanted from me? Or what he wanted for their friendship, or how I could have helped. Because I didn't even ask how I should have helped, because I said, God, this is a good thing. But you see, in my life, that good thing of trying to make people friends became something that is excessively painful to me. Not every opportunity is a God opportunity. Not every good thing is what God's thing for you is. But more importantly, you can't force things to work. You can try. And you might succeed. But the thing you end up with might be way worse than the blessing you thought it would be. I'm going to invite the band back up. So Leah, she thought she could earn her husband's love. She thought she could make him happy. Here's the problem with that, is there's a lot of things in life you can earn. You can earn respect. You can earn business. You can earn position. But you can't earn things that can only be given. You can't deserve something that can only be a gift. Isn't that the whole point that we make about Christ's love? Saying that the whole point of the law was for us to earn our righteousness and we couldn't, so the only way was for God to give it as a gift? If it's not a selfless love, it can't be love. It can only be a service. It has to be selfless. And I can only imagine all the pain that different people in here have felt throughout life. I'm a young guy. I haven't experienced a tenth of the bad things that could go wrong in life. I'm so sorry for whatever you're going through. But let me tell you, you don't have to control it. You might have created it, you might have tried to sustain it, but it doesn't have to keep being a bondage in your life. It doesn't have to keep holding you down. Because you might feel like Leah felt like you tried to earn love and deserve love and fight for affection and make it happen, but it hasn't. But let me tell you this. You weren't made to have control of your life, you were made to have freedom.